Hi everybody, welcome back to the cabin and the garden. Well, if you've been following along this part of my adventure this spring, it's building up or basically clearing the land and making a productive food garden in the forest. And I've been at this for about a month now, just clearing this third of an acre, or about a third of an acre, I guess, and getting it ready for vegetables. I have planted some, and I've got some seeds starting to sprout now and come up through the ground. Now I'm at the point where about 75% of the work is done, I would say, of creating the garden space itself. Hard to believe how long it takes to do just that, but all this soil between the rows here, basically been taking it out, filtering as many stones out as possible, and then making it into these mounds. All the trees that I've cut down to make this clearing, I've cut into firewood, all the bigger stuff. Some of the straight stuff I'm using for building materials, straight poles. I've got some sort of not the best trunks, the tree trunks, kind of lining the gardens, the raised beds. The branches I'm mostly putting into these piles like you see behind me, along with a lot of rotted wood from the forest floor to make raised future raised beds. So composted logs and branches and stuff like that. All the carbon that's going into these mounds will slowly start rotting and creating fertile planting ground. So it's been a lot of work. Anyway, I'm at the point now where I'm starting to pay more attention to the soil composition and the quality of the soil for growing stuff in. I don't want to go through all this work and then find out, like I did last year, that certain areas on the properties have soil that's just not conducive to growing vegetables, at least not the ones I tried. So doing more research, going back to what I learned years ago, I haven't vegetable gardened in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years probably, intensively. I've had the odd thing at the old house, but not much. And I've only had a few things growing at the cabin. So this is a relearning experience for me. Now, I do know and have known about certain things that do well in this acidic soil that I have here, like the potatoes, and I've got some blueberries that I'm going to be transplanting in soon and things like that, tomatoes. But I know that most vegetables do better in alkaline soils, which is not what I have. But anyway, in order to figure all of that out, ordered a soil test kit, and I'm testing the soil here in these raised beds, and then also some of the soils that I have in various pockets around the properties that are good, different in composition. This raised bed that I'm sitting beside, and that's that the nutrient level is about as bad as I presumed based on the results I had last year and just seeing what grows in a forest like this. So this is a cheap soil test kit which tests pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, potassium. And I'll show you the chart, but it is not looking good. So basically, if I look at the pH chart here and compare it to the pH vial, it's very, very clearly in this range here. So 5.5 acidity, neutral being 7 being neutral. And a lot of vegetables do better around neutral, except for those ones that are acid loving that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to have to amend a lot of these beds as much as possible in order to make them productive. Now, unfortunately, the story is no better when it comes to the other nutrients here, or the nutrients. Nitrogen very low, like almost not even registering, which is very concerning. The phosphorus surprisingly is up around medium to high, and I need to do some research and see if that's typical of a forest garden or a forest soil, where the soils are mostly built up from some glacial till, but also mostly from the deciduous trees that have been growing on this property. So what this tells me is that not only do I have all the work involved in actually creating this forest garden, building the chicken coop, getting a fence built up around it to protect it from mostly deer, bear. I don't have many rabbits. We don't have any rabbits here, actually just hares, but not even that many hares to get in, and no groundhogs here. So I'm going to have just the typical things to protect the garden from avian predators, with chickens and stuff like that. So I have a lot of security to build in around this garden. And then of course then I'll be working on the workshop and stuff within this footprint. So a lot of that work, but on top of all of that, I now have to do put as much effort into building the soil and nurturing these plants, these vegetables and fruits, as I do in building the infrastructure. Anyway, I do love this kind of stuff, and I'm not going to shy away from the work or cry about it, that's for sure. I'm going to enjoy seeing what I can do. It's a challenge to take a raw piece of forest like this and make it productive, make it livable for us humans in as much of a small, or in as small a footprint as possible. And I think that's always been one of my objectives, is to try to live close to the land and enjoy nature without destroying it, to attract wildlife and attract or to enrich the land around me rather than to steal from it. So it's a challenge. It's hard for people to do that, for humans to do that, but I think it's a worthwhile challenge. It's a worthwhile objective, and I'm going to continue to work as hard as I can at fulfilling that. So I'm going to take a couple more samples from different spots. I've got this bucket of peat that I'm going to test. I'm going to test the soil down by the stream where I put the potatoes, and I'm going to test the higher ground where I'm looking at putting the greenhouse. So it'd be really interesting to see if there's differences throughout, or if I'm just going to, I think what's going to happen is it's generally going to be pretty close no matter where it is on the property, just because of the region that I'm in and that the underlying bedrock is granite. And I'll have to amend as necessary, and I'm trying to amend with as many natural materials from the area as possible. So that's going to be a lot of green manures, which is growing vegetables like beans and peas, any kind of legumes that fix nitrogen, put nitrogen back into the soil. Going to have to use all the fish remains from this year's fishing, seaweed, all the weeds. You can see starting to grow up pretty thick down in the stream already, so I can start pulling some of that up and putting it into the gardens. Do what I can to enrich the soil and make it as productive as I can naturally. Big challenge, but I hope I'm up to it. So this is the test from the soil and water from down in the swamp, basically. So as you can see, even it was just slightly more acidic and low in it pretty well everything, which I think I expected to be higher in potash. I guess what I'm seeing here is the result of the sphagnum moss that makes up the bulk of that material down in that low area, and that is pretty inert, doesn't carry a lot of nutrients. Now what it is good for is adding to the soil for moisture retention, which I do need. This is pretty dry soil up here. It's more sandy than clay based, so I could definitely use something to retain that moisture in addition to all the compost I'm going to have to add and the leaf matter. So I'll probably will bring up some of that soil just for that reason, and slowly keep spreading it onto the garden, get some darker stuff in on top to hold that moisture. Well, mix it in and then get the composted stuff on top and some mulch on top to hold the moisture. I'm gonna have to continue to do that, probably just keep collecting leaves every time I'm out and throwing them on top of the garden to suppress or to keep that moisture in. Yeah, this is extremely challenging. So this test was a bit of a surprise to me. When we picked up the milk that my wife made the cheese with in the last video, we picked up also some manure from our farmer friend, and composted, well composted, mostly sheep and small cattle breed. Maybe, or not sheep, but goat. Anyway, not overly surprised at the pH level, because they had some limestone screening sort of mixed in with it, probably from the ground where they put all the pile of all the manure and straw. So the alkalinity is actually slightly above neutral. So I'd say based on this test, it's going to be, as everybody's known for hundreds or thousands of years, that manure is good. Composted manure is a good nutrient additive to all of the gardens to grow fruits and vegetables. The tomatoes and the potatoes, especially potatoes, needing more alkalinity, or sorry, more acidity, probably will add compost to them, but rather than let that not too much that it raises the pH level to the point where it becomes neutral or acid. But I think what I'll do is just continue to add the things like the peat moss that's very high in acid from the low ground down there by the stream, and what whey from the, I'm gonna check the alkalinity of whey exactly. I know it's acid, and not sure how much or if that can change the pH in the soil. But anyway, I'll keep those beds as acid as I can, as well as where all the berries and fruits are. So interesting. The one more thing I want to test though is this ash, the pot ash that I got from, or I've been saving from the wood campfires and the wood stoves. So I'll see what that turns out to be. It's supposed to be very alkaline, but I want to see what else shows up. And it's potash, so it should be high in potash or potassium. So I'm going to test that next. So very alkaline, 7.5 on the pH scale, so well neutral is 7, like I said, so that's quite alkaline. Purple is potassium, so it's actually very low, or sorry, nitrogen, very low in nitrogen, high in phosphorus, and very low in potash and potassium. I thought it was the opposite. Well, not completely the opposite, but I'm sure potash is supposed to raise the potash. So I expected that to be like right at the very top and phosphorus to be relatively low. I'll do another test. Maybe it's because I have a lot of charcoal in there as well. Not too sure, but I'm going to keep testing it. But for this video, I think that's it. I think I'm going to just work with these results, try some amendments to the soil in the different beds, and then try each bed, like retest each bed and see what the net alkalinity is and the nutrient base. So I'm learning a lot. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to sign off, get back to work. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you at the cabin next time. Take care.